Although we try not to allow the bitterness to overshadow the sweetness, still we have to acknowledge the bitterness of the conditions, of the inhumane conditions that prevail at Camp Liberty, and the realization that this resettlement may indeed be a cruel hoax. As some of you know, for many years, I was a lawyer that represented victims of state-sponsored terrorism. And it is ironic that today we see a situation that prevailed in Camp Liberty that raises, in my judgment, the specter as to whether this was simply the act of one terrorist group, a Hezbollah group, or whether there was state guidance, cooperation, and even sponsorship. Now, these are heavy charges, but facts are facts. We know what happened prior to the attack. You have seen the pictures. At Camp Liberty, just these bunks, which, as General Jones said, leave people in conditions that are worse than those that we accord to inmates of al-Qaeda at Guantanamo. And we know that prior to the attack, we know because it's a fact, that there were 17,500 concrete walls. This acted as a barrier to provide protection against rocket attacks. Now, what happened? They were removed by the government. Now, sometimes when things are removed, you ask, well, there must be a good reason. There's a shortage of supplies. Somebody else needed immediate protection. But nothing like that occurred. There's no shortage of these firewalls, of these concrete T-walls. There's an abundance all over Iraq. Why were they removed? How can we not ask that question? And if you ask that question, it leads you ineluctably to raise the question of complicity by a government. But we must have an answer, because what happened at Camp Liberty, by any definition, was not only murder, it was mass murder. It was not only mass murder, but it was mass murder which other experts that are here today, including Colonel Martin, who know this camp very well, will explain in detail as to why an attack of this kind could not have occurred, or it's highly unlikely that it could have occurred without the blessings, cooperation, and knowledge of the government's military forces. So that's an important question that we need an answer to, because we need to know who we are dealing with when we talk about the current government of Iraq. Well, the solution to the problem of Camp Liberty is the solution that anybody goes when one goes to a doctor. The first thing that you want is a proper diagnosis. He has to be able to tell you, do you have a rash? Do you have some cancer that's metastasizing? You can't do anything else unless the diagnosis is correct. So we have to be able to diagnose what is happening at Camp Liberty. We have to reach certain conclusions as to whether or not this is simply a fluke or whether this is really part of a larger plan to take these people, deprive them of their own humanity, to kill them at will, and by creating a situation where there is indifference on the part of the United States, because the U.S. remains the leader, that this can serve as a green light for the Iraqis, in combination with the Iranians, to allow Hezbollah or anybody else to do whatever they want. So we have to diagnose the problem and then figure out what we can do next. Now, if you diagnose the problem as one in which we have allowed ourselves to be victims to a hoax, that yes, you can move from Camp Ashraf because this will serve as the way station to being resettled, only to realize that what you're getting into is a cell, a big prison cell. That's a hoax. So the first thing you need to do is to know who put you there. Did they lie to you deliberately? And get out. Because you're not going to be in a camp where people have not only failed to provide you with the basics of refugee life. You know, if you take a look at the camps that the United Nations sets up, they have certain standards in terms of sewage and everything else. Those simple standards don't apply here. As General Jones said, the conditions at Camp Liberty are worse than the conditions that the United States accords to the very worst offenders imaginable, the people that we suspect of being al-Qaeda operatives. So if that's all true, you know that you cannot rely on Iraq, and you know that you cannot stay in that camp because you are completely vulnerable. So you have to say what can be done immediately. And therefore, Congress has thought of two elements that are in this draft resolution that has been sponsored. One involves taking people out of danger, getting them away from a place where they can be shot without any protection, without any room to maneuver, and moving them back to what is still an empty camp, Camp Ashraf. Thank you.